This is a Renew original recording. Hello and welcome to the Believe in People podcast, a 2024 Radio Academy Award nominated podcast to talk all things addiction, recovery and stigma. Today we're with Harriette, who started drinking at just 10 years old. She recounts her youth in a household shaped by her father's alcoholism and her mother's involvement in multiple abusive relationships. Harriette discusses her complex emotions, providing a deeply human perspective on living in a family torn apart by addiction, which led to severe self-harm and life-threatening situations. Harriette.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on the Believe in People podcast. I'm just going to jump straight into it, actually, because I've got a question here that I think will early open up the narrative. And my question to you is, can you describe how and when you were first introduced to alcohol, and what were the circumstances surrounding that period of your life?
Yeah, alcohol's been in my life before I was born, actually. It was introduced to me through my dad being in addiction. So I never really knew anything different. But for myself personally, my first drink probably was younger, like celebrating, like they used to give us carver at Christmas when we was young. But actually going out on weekends drinking, I think it was probably about 10 or 11, definitely still in primary school. My sister was a couple of years older than me and was just like doing the rebelling around the estate. And I just wanted to fit in. Things weren't good at home at the time. So I just jumped on board with what my sister was doing, really.
Tell me a little bit more about what that home life was like then for you to be introduced to it at such a young age.
Yeah. So my dad was an alcoholic, violent towards my mum. That relationship was over when I was about 7 or 8, and then my mum got with a drug dealer, and he bought her a house in Altrincham, a bit out of the way from where we lived. And she took up cocaine, got addicted to cocaine. And my sister she was very close to my mum. So I think she took it bad and was just rebelling with like the other teenagers around the estate. I remember I caught her smoking and I grassed her up to my mum. And when I caught her again, she said, "You smoke some of it."
Yeah.
And I so did. I had a little drag and she went, "You can't grass on me now."
That's quite smart, actually, isn't it? That's quite clever, really, yeah. I like that.
So, yeah, that's how I started smoking.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I'm on board now.
Yeah.
So just started getting drunk on a weekend with my sister, buying bottles of, like, Lambrini and Cassini and 10 Mayfair.
It's almost a bit of, like, that teenage British culture, I think. I remember, the Lambrini, a lot of the girls drink a Lambrini when I was about 13, 14.
Yeah.
So it's quite commonplace, I think, in teenage British culture, or at least it was, 10, 15 years ago, or whatever that may be. Going back to your early life and your childhood, you spoke about your mum being in an abusive relationship. Do you have memories of being in that environment as a child? Seeing it take place, hearing it take place?
It's funny because I had really a close relationship with my dad. I've always favouritised my dad. I think because I knew what I was getting with him and I didn't know any different. Whereas my mum was quite stressed and had 4 young children and was obviously in a violent relationship. I don't think I had empathy towards her as a kid. I've just thought, what are you doing? And I was more angry at her. So with my dad, when he left the family home and they finally broke up for good, I think I blocked a lot of it out because I think it was too hard for me to remember that aspect of my dad. So I think my brain just thought the healthiest thing for me to do was to block it out. But since I've worked on like my mental health coming out of rehab and done counselling, it's like I've managed to unlock memories. So just recently, we had a bit of a debate because he got a speeding ticket in my car. I've not passed my test yet. So he's a named driver on the policy, so he's been using it. And he was screaming at me about it. And I just couldn't handle it. And I think it's because it's like re-triggering that trauma when he screams at me like that.
Yeah, things that are kind of below the surface, like you said, that almost unconscious memory in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Has it changed your opinion of your dad having this counselling and feeling like these feelings are being unlocked at all?
Yeah, I think at the moment it is really difficult. My dad's in recovery. He's nearly 10 years sober.
Okay.
So he was helpful for mine. I stayed with my dad before I went into rehab. He drove me to detox. So it's mixed feelings. I'm really grateful for him. But I think in order for me to actually heal, I have to feel that sadness and that anger towards him.
Yeah.
So recently our relationship's a bit rocky. He doesn't like the confrontation of it. He's only comfortable to talk about what he's settled with in his mind. So it's difficult for us at the moment because like I have always classed him as my best friend.
Yeah.
But at the moment I am struggling to see him in the same light of like admiration.
It's interesting because I think for what he's got to do to keep himself and his recovery safe, and I guess what you're going to do, it's funny to have that relationship with two people in recovery and to have that father-daughter dynamic as well. And you know, you've probably got things that you want to address, maybe things that he's put in his past or made peace with. It's the first time I've actually heard of that dynamic even happening. So even now in my head, I'm trying to get around how that could work, but it's not something that's going to be easy to process for either of you, because he's got to do what he's got to do to ensure he, you know, maintains his recovery. But you've got to address things in order for you to you know, improve your recovery as well, haven't you? Really?
Exactly.
How was that? And obviously drinking at such a young age, how did that affect your daily life? I'm thinking more like your time during school years, and because, you know, 10 primary school you mentioned, a very young time to be drinking. And I know, like most, as we said, teenage culture. Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to not find someone who didn't have their first drink around, you know, between 13 and 16. But 10's quite young. Yeah. So what was that like for you to go through school with those behaviours? And to have done that probably before a lot of your classmates and peers as well.
Yeah, it felt normal with the group that I was with, but I don't think, like, I didn't really speak about it much. It wasn't something that would come up as a subject in primary school. It's just something that I did on a weekend. But funnily enough, when I got to year 7, everyone was doing it anyway on a weekend. So, like, it was normal. Everyone was going. We used to go to a roller rink on a Friday and take out and have a little drink before. And looking back now, I think it's ridiculous that like 12, 13-year-olds are drinking cider and going on roller skates. It's like...
It's that hindsight thing, isn't it? Like, I look at some of the behaviours of teenagers now and think, that's crazy. And then I also think back to my own childhood and go, well, you want too much different yourself. You know?
Exactly.
Those things kind of do overlap, but it's like anything. I guess you always feel older than you actually are. Yeah. I remember being in my 20s and thinking, oh, God, I've got to get this sorted. My life should be sorted now. Wow. Now I'm in my 30s, I'm thinking, why did you think that at 20s? And I'm sure there's things I'm experiencing now in my 30s, while in my 40s, I was like, why did you worry about that? You know, 32, 33.
Well, that's it. Like, through school, I think looking back, it's hindsight, isn't it? Because I got diagnosed with autism when I was in rehab. I kept the referral going. And that was important for me. So looking back, I didn't get like the support in school. I got sent to a behaviour school when I was in year 7 because I was finishing the work early and then distracting everyone. So there was signs there early on. So I think now I look back at my school days and just think that I was just lost. Like, I'm going forward with my academic side now. I'm starting university in September and I'm getting the proper support for it, like with the autism. And it's just like the whole experience of like, what sort of support would I need? And doing that whole assessment for the disability support. Because at first I was just like, I don't even know what help I would need. And then I looked into it and I was like, whoa, I've missed out on loads. And it's on the report that I got back the other day, which goes to university, it says on the bottom of the report, Harriette has never received educational support. And that really upset me to read, actually. It's
something that I don't think schools are great in recognising. And even now, you know, we've got autism, you know, well, a possible autism diagnosis for my nephew, and he's 5 now. And like, we all know he's got autism, but we're not able to get the official documents, the sign off, so he can get that special, you know, that the educational help that he's going to need when he goes into school. But I think it's a real failing of the educational system for children with autism. I think it has been for a very long time as well. How was that for you when you got the autism diagnosis? Did it bring you any comfort? Did it feel
definitely? Yeah, definitely. When they called me back, because after I'd done the assessment, I cried to my dad and said, "What if it comes back that I'm not?" Because someone made a joke of it, saying you're autistic out your head, you. And it's something that I'd never considered.
Yeah.
I got told that I had depression, possible personality disorder, and none of the diagnoses fit. I didn't feel like it felt right when I looked into the symptoms and stuff. I thought, I'm not depressed, or I don't feel like I've got a personality disorder. And then when I read about autism, I was like, shit.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So it was just the only thing that made sense for me. So when I got the call back and to say, like, you've met the criteria and you are autistic, I cried because I just think I'd never had that understanding before. Even when I rang the doctors before I went to rehab to get the referral going, I rang the doctors and said, I think I might be autistic. And the doctor said to me, are you drinking? And I said, it's not about that. And he went, I'm asking you, do you drink to cope? And I cried when he asked me that question.
Yeah.
Because everyone was...
You thought he was going to just fob you off, like, oh, it's just the alcohol again,
exactly.
sort of thing. Yeah,
and blame the alcohol sort of thing. But he was actually reasoning with me, like, maybe you drink for social, like, help or like a social lubricant, which makes sense when I look back at my childhood. Because I think that's what I used it for, to just help me to be sociable. And
it came at such an important time as well, didn't it, that diagnosis, if you was going through rehab at the same time as well.
Yeah.
That must have been good to have all these things kind of coming together at once for you in terms of like personal growth.
I think it was paramount for my recovery. I think if I came out of rehab and I didn't have that diagnosis, I'd still feel lost.
Yeah.
Because it's like I've always felt like something was different. So that level of understanding for me was just massive for my recovery, and I think that's what spurred me forward to keep working on the mental health side of things.
Yeah.
Because for me, I've spent long periods of time self-harming from a very young age, from as young as about 4 years old, pulling my own hair out. And then I think for me, self-harming was alcohol.
Yeah.
I was just killing myself. And it wasn't pretty. I severed my radial artery. I tried to take an overdose. I know I'm lucky to be here. I've narrowly escaped death twice. And I don't think I really take the weight of that sometimes. But I think that's also what spurs me on to make sure I'm living a good life and I'm doing something good for the world. Because I did get a chance. I was minutes away from bleeding out. I remember them in the ambulance talking to me saying, what's your brother's name? What's your brother's birthday? And I was saying, answering the questions, and I was going, let me sleep. And they was going, no, Harriette, you can't sleep. Obviously, I wouldn't have been sleeping. Yeah. I was losing consciousness.
Trying to keep you with him. That's incredible.
And I wouldn't calm down either for the blood transfusions.
Yeah.
I could only calm down when my dad came in the room, and I just cried. I was adamant that I didn't need the blood transfusions because I'd had a history of care. I was like, use the blood for someone else. And they were like, no, Harriette, you need it. You need the blood. But yeah, I'm still processing that, I think.
Yeah. To fill the gaps in there then, so starting drinking at such a young age, and obviously you mentioned coming up to this point and going through detox. At what point did you feel that alcohol had really taken a hold of you? At what point did you realise you was dependent on this substance? And was there an event that led to that as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Talk me through all that.
I had a tricky upbringing, so I was misunderstood. I was viewed as a naughty child because I obviously looking back, autism, and they think ADHD. So I'm waiting for the process to go forward for the ADHD. They recommended it when I got my autism diagnosis. So my mum just didn't really know what to do with me. So I was not treated well looking back. Hence the self-harming behaviour starting from a young age because I couldn't regulate my emotions. So that was tricky. And then as I got a bit older, I was kicked out of the family home at 16 from my mum having a drunken outburst and getting aggressive. So it was me and my sister to fend for ourselves from 16. And then I was smoking quite a lot of weed during that time. And I was just like kind of white knuckling life for a bit. And then I got into my first relationship in 2019. I was very picky to get into one. I didn't want to get into a relationship that was wrong for me. And I thought I'd met someone who was supportive of me and like really that caught me in a bad time. I was not in a good place before I met her and moved out to Dubai. And the relationship was just toxic. So after like 6 months, my brother got me plane tickets home. She hit me. It was just not a good relationship. And I remember thinking, I can't be in this relationship because it's exactly what my mum did. So I left that and I thought, I'm not going to let this destroy me. So I straight away applied for an access course into nursing and got a job doing living care and started doing psychotherapy on a Tuesday afternoon. So I was studying, working, doing living care and then doing psychotherapy on a Tuesday. And looking back now, I needed time to process what was getting spoke about in those sessions. So that's when my drinking, I was a functioning alcoholic for a bit. I was drinking on the job, doing care, looking after vulnerable people. And I was meant to start university. So I come away from that living care role where I got quite close with the family. And the daughter was a nurse. She's been a nurse with the NHS for about 40 years. And I remember thinking, I need to tell them that I've been drinking. And I told it to my psychologist at the time. And she said, well, you just do whatever's right for you. So I told the nurse and I told the daughters, and they said that we knew you'd been drinking, but you was always giving such good care that we didn't have any reason to pull you on it. So then I went back home and I was trying to get a council property, but because I'd been earning doing living care, they wouldn't put me in anywhere for the council. But I was explaining to them that I'm meant to be starting university. I don't want to be around students because I knew that my drinking was getting a little bit bad, but I was just trying to keep myself on a straight and narrow. And my drinking just got out of control in that relationship because I was still in contact with her. It was just toxic for back and forth for months. And my drinking was just, I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I think that relationship just broke me. I think that highlighted everything that had gone wrong in my life before, and I just couldn't handle it. So then I stopped the term and I was in like homeless units, and I went and got drunk, and I had a phone call with my ex, and I just went to take an overdose. I took a pre-gabalin. And I'd had cocaine. And when I got to the hospital, they put like the curtains around me and they said, you know, you're really lucky to be here, don't you? And I was like, I cried and I was like, I don't want to die. And then a few months after that, I severed my radial artery. And I just thought, I can't do it. I didn't have any control. I was like, I knew I was going to die. And I think all my family knew I was going to die. So I thought I have to go to rehab. I can't do this. I was trying to do like AA meetings on Zoom and just like all this little groups that I was attending, and then tried to do community rehab, and I was just drinking after things got brought up in the community rehab. I just couldn't do it. So after I severed my radial artery, I just rang my alcohol worker and I just said, I think I need to go to rehab. And she referred me for a complex case social worker, and that got the ball rolling. And then I was able to come down on alcohol use before I went in. My dad helped me do that. He would buy me a 2-litre cider, and I was only allowed to drink it past 7 o'clock. And that was, I just couldn't wait to go to rehab then. I remember I really just couldn't wait. And my date got moved back a couple of times. And I was like, fuck, just need to go. And I, like when I went to my detox, I went there and I wasn't like heavily under the influence, and everyone was shocked because they were like, you know, like you're pretty sober.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't realise like I could have used this last opportunity to get absolutely steamboated.
Some people do as well, don't they?
Exactly.
It's like that one last hurrah before they go and get absolutely trashed.
But no, I'm glad I didn't, and I'm glad that I brought it down before I went into rehab, because I think it just made me feel so much better, so much quicker, because I wasn't blitzing it before I went in.
Yeah.
And that's with thanks to my dad that he helped me.
I was about
do
to
that.
say, that's probably, you know, obviously your dad being in recovery, and fair play to him to put himself in a position where he's around these substances in order to help yourself as well. I think, you know, and he must have, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? You know, depending on where his recovery is, that higher power, so to speak, and you know, how is he able to help you in that situation? A quick side question, because this is something that I've experienced in the past with some of our guests. In terms of your sexuality, did you find that, or have you always been comfortable with that, or did you suppress that at any point for alcohol, have trouble with being in denial about the sexuality? Did any of that affect you at all, or have you always been comfortable with who you are?
I kissed a girl when I was in primary school, and my sister caught me. This was when my mum was on cocaine. This was in Altrincham. And I kissed a girl, one of my friends then, and my sister caught me doing it, but she didn't tell me that she did. So she walked in the house quietly and then went back out and then come back in noisily. And obviously I stopped kissing my friend.
Yeah.
And she's like, what have you been doing? I was like, nothing. And then later on, my mum collared me and went, have you been kissing Amy? And I went, no. What do you mean? Like, I was just really embarrassed.
Of course, yeah.
And then just to be open about it, I didn't have sex till I was 21. And then when I did lose my virginity, I cried my eyes out after it. It just didn't feel right to me. And then I slept with a few men that I knew after, like, that I'd had good friendships with. And I just didn't like it. And then I came out as bisexual to my mum. And funnily enough, my sister came out as bisexual a few years earlier, and she went, you're not, you're just fucking greedy. Yeah. And then
Stop stealing my gimmick, is what she was saying. Being bisexual is my thing, not yours.
She was like, you're straight, you're just fucking greedy. And then when I came out as bisexual, mum went, oh, you're just gay. Yeah. So the two complete different responses.
I like that.
Yeah.
Especially with how she was when you was younger. To be fair, if that was your mum's response, maybe she always knew. I guess after, you know, hearing that with Amy when you was younger, that's probably the case. I think parents do know that, they often say, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in terms of the things you've gone through there, would you say that there was a specific rock bottom moment that made you realise that you needed to change? Obviously, the close encounters with death twice is you could say that was a rock bottom. Was there anything else that you thought, right, this is the moment I have to change, or was it those two events that you'd say? It
was the severing of my radial artery. I think that was the catalyst for trying to get help was my relationship breakdown. And when I was a functioning alcoholic, that's when I first reached out to CGL. And then I was going through after that process, I'd tried to do the overdose and I severed my radial artery.
And was that self-harm? Did you do that to yourself?
I punched a window.
Oh, wow.
And I went back through for the second pain.
Yeah.
And I 100% severed it. I didn't even... The crazy thing is I didn't even know how bad I was bleeding. It was outside my uncle's property, because he's in addiction. So I was drinking buddy, people who are in the same shit, you just find them. And he shut me out, and it was so stupid. I just wanted to get my tobacco. And I punched the window. And I thought, well, the first pain's not enough.
Yeah.
And stupidly went back through for the second pain. And it was a tiny little nick, the cut there. You can see the scar where they've opened it up. But the original cut was just a tiny little V. And it just 100% severed it. So it was lucky, but really unlucky.
At the same time, yeah.
And my uncle didn't know. So the neighbours came out, and they I remember them shouting, she's fucking bleeding to death out here. And they rang an ambulance. And I said, can my cousin come with me? And so they went, right, Marshall, she wants you to go with her, in the ambulance. And he said he stepped foot outside the door and all he could smell was copper, and it made him feel so sick that he couldn't come out of the door. Yeah. And that would have been obviously all the blood.
Jeez.
And they cordoned off the property because they thought it could have been
a death.
A death.
Yeah.
I only recently went back round to the neighbours about a month ago, and just to tell them like I'm alive. And that gives me goosebumps to say because it was just amazing. Like, she
because they
saved
want to
my
know
life.
what happened to you, would they? It's just there 1 minute and then off
Exactly.
you gone, yeah.
She saved my life. I said, "Just you saved my life," and she said, "I know that I did. I know that." And she said, "I've had nightmares about it."
Bloody hell.
Yeah, they're horrific. I just remembered that when the relationship did break down and I came back from Dubai, I was assaulted on the plane
Oh, wow.
back home.
Yeah.
I didn't make a fuss about it on the plane because I was so embarrassed. But then when it stopped over in Amsterdam, I turned around to the man and said, "I know what you did." And I said to him something like, "You know that's fucking wrong, don't you?" And he just looked at me and scarpered down the aisle, and I thought, I can't put up with this.
No.
So I pulled like security at Amsterdam, and I said, like, I've been assaulted on the plane. And they had to change my flight and like take me like, to do like all the medical checks. And it's mad, like they said that it was like on the rise. And it's crazy. Like,
you think that'd be the last place something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what? It reminds me of, there was a scene in a Netflix show, Sex Education. One of the characters is on the bus and she's assaulted. And she downplays it at first, much like what you just said then. And it's actually like, in terms of the overall story arc of that character, it's a big part of that person's trauma and how she's got over it. But the downplaying, as you've said, is something that a lot of people do.
And the reason why I done it was because I was embarrassed because I was drunk.
That's it, yeah, the embarrassment, yeah.
Yeah, I was drunk and I thought, because they nearly didn't let me on the flight because I was so drunk. Obviously, I'd had my breakup and everything, so I was steaming. So when I got on the plane, they gave me a couple of paracetamol and some water to try and like make me a bit drowsy. So I was like in and out of sleeping. So that's what, and then I just like was shocked that it was happening. And I remember trying to roll away towards the person next to me, but I think that they were together and I was in an aisle amongst a group of them. So there was a man next to me and a man next to me, and I remember trying to wriggle away and things like that. I just didn't want to make a scene on the plane because I was so embarrassed that I got on drunk. I thought, I can't say anything now because I'm already the mess on the plane.
Do you think that's why that you was maybe targeted, because he was in a vulnerable position? Yeah.
And that happened again before I went to rehab. I went to a festival to go and see the Strokes. Because I thought I'll just have a last hurrah, so to speak, because I love music. And the Strokes are one of my favourite bands. And I was, after the festival had finished, I was a bit stranded and I'd had some drugs and some alcohol. And I remember I was trying to pull over cars, and I pulled over a car and, again, was assaulted. And then, like, when it had happened, he'd kicked me out of the car, and I ran to a care home. I didn't know where I was because I'd never been to the city before. And then when I got to the train station and they tried telling me off for like I'd done something. I can't remember what I'd done. Like I'd had no shoes on, or I can't remember what I'd done. They said one of the traffic people tried to say like, you can't be on here. And I screamed at her saying, I've just been fucking assaulted. And they went, do you want to come in and talk to us about it? I was like, not really. And they was like, we think you need to talk to us. And that was a whole scenario. And I only found out that was going to be no further action when I was in detox.
Do you know one of the frustrating things that you often see with these stories is the people that would blame you because you put yourself in that position, because you was the one that got yourself drunk, you was the one that was under the influence, as opposed to just thinking, well, actually, no, it's the fucking rapist's fault for being a fucking rapist.
It's still something I do still, like, something in rehab that we went over, because I didn't realise like how much control was used in my relationship until things were pointed out in rehab. And I still was like, it's my fault for getting in the car. It's my fault for being drunk.
That's it, the blaming yourself as well. Yeah? And sometimes that's how you're made to feel that it's your fault.
Yeah.
And because of the way society is, it's maybe that's the natural reaction to think, oh, what did I do? Or maybe if I didn't dress this way, this wouldn't have happened and stuff like that. When it's like, bull fucking shit. Do you know what I mean? I've seen stories out there from, actually, there was an exhibit not so long ago, I don't know the details of it, but it had clothes of survivors in frames and on mannequins. And the idea of this was actually some of these clothes, it was long pants, jumpsuits. It wasn't short skirts. It wasn't mini tops. So, do you know, all these sort of things that people would assume, oh, do you know, that's why this happened. Because the whole idea of the exhibit is to show, no, rape happens because of rapists, not because of what women wear. And I thought that was really powerful. It's
funny that you mentioned about the items of clothing, because I actually wore a white vest and I put on it "autistic and proud," like in permanent marker pen, because I thought I'm really going to embrace autism. This was before I got diagnosed, because it just.
But you knew.
I knew that I was in my in my gut, so I thought I'm going to embrace it for this festival. And then after the assault and stuff, I was like, did that help get me?
That contributed. Did it make you a target? Is what you're thinking?
Yeah, and that's really sad.
It is, and I, you know, you'll never really know if that is the case. But I just think it's, you know, it happens because of those people, and you know, there's no excuse for it. And I think you'd be doing yourself an injustice if you was to be thinking, did it happen because I wore this or I did this? I don't think you can do that to yourself. I think it has to accept that these things happen because people are not accept, that's probably the word, but understand that these things happen because people out there are just absolute bastards.
Yeah.
You know, absolute, you know, monsters out there, really, when you hear stuff like this. I always find it really upsetting as well. And you're not the first person to come on this podcast and talk about, you know, experiences of sexual violence and things like that. And it never gets any easier to hear individuals' experiences.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad that these things happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's important to talk about.
It is important to talk about, because obviously so many people have probably been in similar situations to you that maybe could even be listening to this and maybe blaming themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not the case.
No, you don't need to.
No, absolutely not. I'm just going to take a little. It's a sidetrack. Robbie, you're just going to have to turn it this part. I'm just going to have to quickly go back to these notes and see where we was here.
We can edit.
No, absolutely. I get it. It's just like
I've thrown you off course.
It's just one of the things that I get really fucking pissed off when I hear these things. And like, I normally when I'm doing these podcasts, I've got a real, do you know, way of going for it, and then something like that happens and it just completely
throws you off a bit.
And I know it shouldn't be the case, but since I've got a daughter now, she's 2, and I now and again I just get these intrusive thoughts where I think, God, what is she going to experience and deal with? And that gives me the anxiety, and I think, you know, I'd never want anything to happen to her naturally. So because
the statistics of it are just
it's so high as well,
and frightening. I think it's like 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 women will experience some form of assault.
It's absolutely, and things that, you know, you talked about domestic violence, but that's one of the things that pops into my head. I've got my niece is 15, and I often think, I had a thought coming the other end, and I was like, what if she ends up with a boyfriend who was like really mean to her?
I know.
And I was like, that's a high possibility that could happen, and I just get really
mad about it.
Mad about it. Stop being fucking dicks. Yeah, fucking bastards everywhere. Oh, right. To be fair, on the topic of relationships then, how did your addiction impact your family and close relationships, and what changes did you notice in their behaviour towards you during your struggle with addiction as well?
Yeah, there definitely was an impact from my family. I remember, like, my dad used to speak to me about suicide all the time, and he'd say to me, you know that if you kill yourself, that you're going to ruin the family when you're gone. He'd be like, I'll never be the same again. And my sister would say it, if you kill yourself, I'm not going to be the mum to Corey that I should be, because a part of me will be missing. And it just got to the point where, like, I only found this out recently, that there was conversations amongst my family of like, should we answer the phone to her? What have you said to her? Have you set her off? What did you say to her on the phone? You've made it worse. And
so people are like treading on eggshells around you as well,
definitely,
aren't they, during this time?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really close to my sister. Like, I lived with her from when I was 16. We've obviously grown up in the same house. We've had the same experiences, similar experiences throughout our lives. And she said, like, a part of her was missing during that time. And now the difference. But yeah, my family went through hell, definitely.
What's your relationship like with them now?
Amazing.
Is it?
Yeah. Apart from the fact that I study counselling and I psychoanalyse them.
Yeah, that's it now, isn't it? Now you're on the run, it's like...
I'm like, that's a trauma response.
Yeah, that's... I like that. Yeah. It does, but you get that with even with, like, the people, people I work with, people with lived experience in recovery, and like, we can just be having a chat outside, where smoking around the back, and next thing you know, you're getting really deep dived into it. It's like, well, hang on. It's like, oh, Matt, the way you took your jacket off was a bit... I don't think you're just winding me up, to be fair, but really getting into the deep of it. What's your relationship like? Obviously, well, actually, you've said about your dad. Tell me a little bit more about your relationship with your mum now, then.
My mum,
because where is she in all this? Because obviously she had her own addiction problems.
She still is. Yeah, she drinks vodka every night. I've come to peace with the fact that my mum will probably never be at peace. I think that's difficult for me because she's a great person, but she's been hard done by throughout her life. And that's why I think, like, looking into the stuff that drags you down in your mind, the things that have impacted you, is so important, because she drinks every night because she can't handle the stuff that's going on in her head. And I just accept that'll probably take her. I was thinking about it last night, to be honest. I was thinking, because she's saying that she's going to give up smoking, and I was thinking, right, you drink vodka every night, like, her chest is bad. She's overweight a bit, so I was just thinking, realistically, I should probably put it in my mind, like, that she might not last the next 10 years or 5 years, and that's horrible to think, but that's the reality of addiction. Like, there is only two ways out. You either get into recovery or you die.
What does she think seeing you, then, what you've conquered? Has that been any sort of motivation to her, really, to make changes, do you think, or...?
I don't know if it motivates her to make changes, but I know she's definitely proud of me.
That's nice.
She says, like, I love you more and more every day.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, I'm becoming the favourite now. So.
Yeah. I hope your sister does listen to this, actually. She's going to love it.
It's all right, you can all know I'm the favourite on both sides.
So tell Harry, based on your experiences, what do you think are the most important messages that young people should hear about alcohol use?
Like, how normal it is, and it's not. You know, like how our society breeds it to be normal to go out on a weekend, and then you'll do that until you've got a problem, and it's your outlet. Because I look back on my drinking and I think, well, did I always have a problem then? Because I always was waiting for the weekend, or like I'd do my night shifts and then I'd be like, right, I'd get pissed. So I think it's just like, the society we live in, it's just normal to have a glass of wine if you've had a stressful shift, or and it's like people don't deal with their own stresses. It's like someone said to me once, you can't feel like a drink. You can't feel like a drink. You can feel a feeling that's making you want to have a drink, but you can't feel like having a drink. So you have to think about what that feeling is.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's deep. And it's interesting talking about culture, because, I've said about, like, my teenage years and how that was a big part of the culture. But one thing that I'm seeing now is, I think generally hitting that age now, being a parent and following some sobriety pages on Instagram, one of the things that is quite common is to talk about mummy's wine time. Getting the kids to bed, having a glass of wine because you've had a stressful day as a mum, sort of thing. And that's something that it seems to be, like, really perpetuated within that culture of just having, that wine on the evening, and how quickly that one glass of wine can turn into, two glasses of wine, and then so forth and that. But the culture of it is everywhere, and I guess, like, as a teenager, we're experiencing it. Yeah. When we go to college or university, we're experiencing it, and then even as parents, you're sort of experiencing it.
I think now as well, like, looking back, I think if you wasn't to get involved in the drinking, like, they're the cool kids of the year, the popular kids. So if you don't get involved, are you one of the nerdy ones? And that's frowned upon, to be one of the nerdy ones. And it's cool to be a nerd. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with being nerdy. Yeah.
I found, again, going back to my niece, I found it interesting. Her father is Muslim, and they don't drink as part of their culture. Yeah. And even though they're not what I'd call practicing Muslims in sense of prayer and stuff like that, there is the cultural things that have stuck with it. And she wouldn't even entertain the notion of alcohol as a teenager now. She says ever. She said, no, it'll never be for me. Yeah. I said, well, you never know. But I do find that interesting when we look at the cultural sides of things and how that religious aspect of it to it. And again, not practicing, But yeah, I can't. She's 14, gone on 15 now, and I've no point have I ever thought about that teenage drinking being part of her upbringing and her culture, which is a good thing, really. But then I've had people on this podcast before. We had a girl on, and she said she didn't drink at all in her teenage years, and then when she went to university, it was like, oh my God, what have I been missing out on? And then that was it.
Exactly.
And that became, something that really dominated her life was alcohol.
And that's the thing, it's part of university culture when you leave school as well. It is just a massive part of culture. Absolutely. It's all over the adverts on telly.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, I think it was normalised from a young age. Like, my family would have parties, there'd be family parties going on. And when I started studying counselling, my tutor said to me, she went, so you might see your dad drink. This was just an example that she used. So she went, so you might grow up with your dad being an alcoholic, and you might see him in a toxic relationship, and he drinks to get through it. And then you yourself might get in a toxic relationship, and you might say to yourself while you're growing up, I'll never be like him, I'll never be like him. And then before you know it, you're in a toxic relationship and you're using drink. And I was just stood there like,
just describing my life, like this hypothetical situation is my life down to a T.
That's me.
Talking about education then, like how can education and awareness campaigns better reach young people, do you think?
Yeah, this is massively important, I think. I think like people need to be going around in schools and stuff, doing talks, and trying to like raise awareness at the right time before like the
prevention element of it, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely.
I guess the interesting thing is, when you talk about the cool kids and stuff like that, I remember someone coming in our school, and Talk to Frank was a big thing when I was a teenager, and someone would come in and started talking about drugs, and naturally, the cool kids, as we said in quotations there, was the ones going, I've just come out of that assembly thinking, now I just want to go try all these drugs.
Exactly.
So it did the complete opposite in a way. Someone was like, actually, that sounds really good. That sounds really interesting.
I think they go on about it from an addiction perspective, but they don't explain how it can lead from a social thing to being a problem. And people think like there's like a stigma against, like they'll say like heroin addicts, like smackheads or bagheads and all these terminologies that people use. And people don't realise that alcohol's the number one killer.
Yeah.
Do you know, they'll think, oh, I'm never going to be an addict, like and have a smack and all this stuff. But
I had a friend who went to a needle exchange because it was steroid use, and he was complaining when he went to the needle exchange because he was surrounded by, as you said in quotations there, smackheads.
Exactly.
And I was like, mate, you're going into a pharmacy to get syringes to inject yourself with a substance that makes you feel better in terms of your physical.
Thing,
I was like,
really.
how is this any different? How can you have that judgment? And he was like, no, it's not the same. I was like, it is though. It's the exact fucking same. But as you've said there with alcohol, there is always, I think, alcohol especially because of the legalities of alcohol, people look at others with opiate dependence, and because heroin is illegal.
Exactly.
It's like some sort of moral high ground with it. And it's like, well, I've seen alcohol ruin people's lives just as much as heroin.
Exactly.
And if not more, just because of how accessible it is.
That's it. It's legal. So I think like the government don't really like throw it in people's faces how dangerous it is.
Yeah. And like, it's the Euros playing at the moment, alcohol adverts everywhere. I was listening to TalkSport, and there was doing some like Carling correspondent that they spoke to specifically because it was sponsored by Carling. But alcohol is everywhere, isn't it?
I think it feeds a really unhealthy relationship as a society, because like when you go, like when you watch like 24 Hours in Police Custody or like prison programs, most people are in there because they've needed substances and they've gone out to steal, or they've gone out to do this, or they was under the influence of alcohol when they broke the law. And I just feel like, is anybody not noticing the correlation here? Do you know what I mean?
Someone said it not so long ago, if alcohol was introduced today, it'd be made illegal instantly.
Yeah.
And it's only because it's so ingrained in our culture why it isn't. So talking about governments and things like that, what changes or initiatives would you like to see implemented to support young people to make healthier choices regarding alcohol, if anything?
Well, I think there's a lot of money being made off alcohol being sold. But I think that it's like people need to know the facts of it. It's like even like alcohol-related deaths, they don't all get marked down, because if somebody runs out into the road and they get run over drunk, they're going to go down as a car crash. Yeah. It's not going to go down as an alcohol-related incident.
Yeah.
So the numbers for like up for keeping people aware aren't accurate, but I just don't feel like they try and give people that information.
Yeah, and I've thought about this before, and I don't know how easy it'd be to do in terms of the logistics of it. But when you look at smoking, you can't buy a pack of cigarettes now without seeing some giant neck tumour on there that was caused by it. And one of the suggestions someone said before was about putting statistics regarding alcohol deaths on crates of alcohol.
I think so.
And I think whilst it could be done, I just don't think they would.
It will.
Because, again, I don't know the ins and outs of it in the way some people do, but the amount of money that we as a government, as a society, makes off alcohol.
That's what I think it is.
It's insane, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and
the
I think
taxation of it, yeah.
I think it's down to people like groups like this and people who are passionate about recovery and passionate about making a difference.
Absolutely.
That have to share the message, because I just don't see it happening massively from the government while all the money's being made.
Yeah, I don't think it'd hurt to do an advert.
An
advert just talking about alcohol-related
Exactly.
deaths. If you can't plaster it on every crate of alcohol that's been sold, there should be more campaigns around it, because sometimes campaigns, when it's like on a bus stop or something you see on a website from the NHS, it's just a little bit like, yeah, whatever, sort of skip through it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there is a way to do it, like a really positive and healthy campaign around alcohol related deaths and illnesses. And the point you made there on the drunk driving incident, not drunk driving, but being drunk and being hit by a car, it's a really interesting point. So how many of these alcohol deaths aren't even being related, and deaths related to alcohol is related to, I think it's 6-7 different types of cancers. If people die from cancer, it doesn't necessarily go down as an alcohol-related death, does it?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's one of the things where the figures for this topic and this area will always be skewed, which is even more scary when the figures that we are getting related to alcohol-related deaths is so high. Because then I'm like, well, actually, if it's as high as it is, how much worse could it actually be?
The numbers we've got are staggering anyway, so to think that they're not even accurate and there's more, that's scary in itself.
Absolutely,
yeah, definitely. And I think it's something like, I don't know the actual statistics on it, I'd have to check, but in doing like a different campaign for recovery, like it's like 1 in 3 people are affected by addiction. It might even be 1 in 2, and it's not even if like, it might not be directly you, but there's so many kids growing up with like alcoholic parents, and then, but without knowing the actual information about addiction, so they think it's their fault. There's kids blaming themselves, and then
it's interesting that I saw an old friend yesterday, and his brother had an addiction problem, and he said he finds it odd when he looks at it. They both had the very same upbringing, but one turned to alcohol dependence, and the other lad, Chris, has been working full time. And one of the things that made me laugh, actually, is his brother's he's a good lad. He's been in recovery for 9 years now. But when he says to him, it's like, "Are you working yet? Like, have you got a job?" He goes, "Only on myself." And I was like, "That's brilliant."
Well, it's true.
It's true. But when I heard that, I couldn't stop laughing. Only on myself. Only on myself.
That's what we all should be
exactly,
doing.
Yeah. I thought it was just a really good answer.
Plus something that pays the wages
Absolutely,
without.
if possible. So one of my questions to you is, we've talked about autism, we've talked about alcoholism, but you also have scoliosis. So can you discuss how scoliosis affects your physical and mental health, particularly during your addiction and the recovery phases as well?
To be honest, when I got diagnosed with it, I thought it was on a level where, like they said, if you keep working on it, you can strengthen your lower abdomen so that you can support your spine more. And I just tried to pretend it didn't exist, to be fair, bury my head in the clouds. And I think that kind of helped me do that while I was in addiction. But then, like, through recovery, before I went to rehab, I couldn't really feel the problems, the niggles with staying on my dad's sofa. And then when I got out and I was sober and I'm staying on my dad's sofa,
suddenly aware of it.
I'm suddenly well, my back's starting to hurt now. This isn't comfortable anymore. I need my own place now.
What's the sort of pain management that you go through for something like that then? Is there prescription painkillers involved?
I don't really like taking them. I'm one of them.
That's what I was going to ask, because that's one thing for people in addiction. When they're prescribed prescription painkillers, Do you know? Well, a couple
wary,
of
aren't you?
Yeah, well, wary of it, and I think that sometimes the GPs really need to have more of an understanding of what.
Because they just dash them out like the smarties.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, well, hang on, this person's got addiction, and you want to prescribe prescription painkillers? Is that a good idea?
Exactly. It's like, can you not see on my record?
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the things that always baffles me when you hear that, but. Yeah, I guess it's an interesting point. So are you supposed to take prescription painkillers for this?
Not really. I could get like naproxen and things like that, but I prefer not to. Yeah. I think for me it's like about like I try and do yoga and try and keep active and things like that because I don't want it to get to the point where it gets worse. Yeah. I'm trying to make it better, and I recently did get it checked and they said it's not got any worse. So
that's good then. Yeah. Has it affected your mental health as well then as your physical health? Having that
more so the thought of like maybe down the line I'm gonna like really struggle because the things is with scoliosis like you can have surgery or wear a back brace, and I just don't want to get it to that point when they diagnosed it. So luckily, like throughout my addiction, I didn't make it any worse because I've just recently had it checked. But yeah, that's the worrying thing for me. Like I don't want to get to the point where I'm going to have a back brace or surgery. So if I can prevent it, and probably came into recovery at a good time, because if I was in addiction, I probably would have sped up the process of getting worse because I won't be thinking about my posture. No, you're not going to be sat there drunk thinking, I better sit up straight.
Better sit up straight whilst I down this fucking bottle of vodka. Jeez, yeah.
So yeah, don't go hand in hand looking after your health.
No. And the yoga must be a massive help though. I think people underestimate how positive yoga can be on the human body, don't they?
Well, my partner really likes yoga, so yeah, she's good for that. A little yoga teacher.
Yeah. So when in addiction, it does really take over every single aspect of your life. Do you know, I was speaking to someone recently, they said it's in terms of recovery, for them it's not just a day by day thing, but it's almost down to a minute by minute thing as well, do you know? But I think obviously there are a lot more positives to being in recovery in terms of what you can do. So what are you doing now with your life now that you've achieved abstinence?
That's for me like one of the most important things, because like growing up, looking back, obviously being autistic now, I struggled with things that were going on in the world. Like I was like, oh my God, there's so many animals like being hurt and there's so much going on, and I just couldn't get my head around it. Yeah. And it was like the thing that was a catalyst for me, like self-harming, because I thought I'm only one person. How can I help?
Overwhelmed.
Do anything. And I was just completely overwhelmed by the world. And I think a lot of people fall into addiction because they are creative people or because they are deep thinkers, and there's so many talented people in addiction. It breaks my heart because it's like, I think it's the people that can't find the place in the world, or they can't manage the pain that they're in, so they turn to substances. And we're losing so many people that are talented, that are amazing people, that could do amazing things in the world because they find solace in substances. So for me now, I'm going university in September to do animal behaviour and conservation.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping to get some conservation work done in like places like Africa and things when I'm
that'd be incredible.
Finished. Yeah.
I love that.
Because I know there's animals that need help, and I was just like, what can I do on my own? But then in rehab and through recovery, I thought, well, you better do something than nothing. And I do have a passion for animals and for the welfare of the world. So I'd rather be doing something. Yeah. And it's only through recovery that outlook's changed, because before I was just beating myself up with a bottle, really.
And you're just trying to survive when you're in addiction, aren't you? Really? That's kind of the thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
You can't even think about the big picture stuff, or what else is going on in the world, and how you can, as you said, they contribute to that. So I think that's incredible.
So yeah, I'm going to uni in September. I'm also studying counselling, so I'm dual studying and being really greedy with my academics now.
That's just you, apparently. You're just a very greedy person. No,
that's my sister.
Oh, is that your sister? Yeah. There you go.
Not me.
You're not the greedy one. No. So I was counselling. So I guess when you do counselling, it's interesting because now you're putting yourself on the opposite side of the fence you was sat on prior. Have you learned much about yourself since doing counselling?
Yeah, I think that has been huge for my recovery. It's like, it's difficult, it's hard work to do, but it's worth it, because I feel like ultimately if I don't deal with what's going on in my head, that's what will lead me back to a bottle. That's what will take me back. If I've got any problems going on in there, that'll be like, I know what a good idea. Yeah. So I'm just like, it's dealing with your demons at the end of the day. So it's like you learn it when you're learning the theory, you're applying it to yourself. And to be fair, to being in recovery, I am ahead of the other students, like, because I've
got that first-hand experience of
being in rehab.
And
they're like, behaviours, you behave like this and you behave like that, and you've got a light shone on you, and it's like, whoa. And then just getting into counselling, I'm like, I already know all my behaviours, suckers.
Real in tune with it, real aware.
So yeah, it's been massively helpful looking at that side of things.
And I also understand that you're working on a project called the Domino Effect.
Yeah, very exciting.
Tell me more about the Domino Effect, because I don't know much about it, considering my proximity to the project. I actually don't know too much about it. Tell me a little bit about what the Domino Effect is.
Yeah. So it's a project run by Paul and Kev, and they have got Mancunians involved in it. I think they've done a similar project about kids in care and a couple of years ago, and they've got a good team together. They've got a good creative bond. They're very funny to work around, and they've had a good idea of like making a documentary and like a music video about the domino effect of addiction, and not just addiction, the recovery aspects of it. Yeah. So it's like, how has addiction impacted you growing up, and how does that go on to impact your life? But then alternatively, how's recovery impacted your life? Because I think that's really important. Like, yeah, it is really sad and it's heartbreaking, the amount of people that are getting lost through addiction. But the whole point is that there is hope, and there really is, and people don't realise that when they're in the depths of despair, but there is hope out there. So we're just trying to make a campaign. It's a campaign that's basically just, it shows this. Like, it's got a documentary with it where it highlights like the impact of addiction. I don't want to say too much about it.
You don't want to give too much away. I understand. But it's interesting saying the domino effect, because I learned very early when I started working in services that the saying nobody goes into addiction alone, and the impact that by as an individual. I guess when looking at a domino effect, we could talk about your parents and their behaviours, how that's affected you, how your relationship and your behaviours maybe affected other people, and so on and so on and so on. But alternative recovery as well, like how much that spreads. And for those in a fellowship program, I think the 12th step is to spread the word of recovery, isn't it? So it is the double-sided.
Because it's like being in recovery, like my sister said, it motivates her to do more. It motivates her to be better. Yeah. And I think it's the same with like even my little brother. Like, the best thing that I can do is be an example for myself and for my family. And obviously I'm competitive, so I'll be the first sibling to graduate uni, the first sibling to pass my driving test.
Gotta be you, want it.
The competitive side of it.
There's nothing wrong with being competitive. It sometimes brings out the best side in other people as well, doesn't it?
It's one of the behaviours that come up in rehab. Competitive. I was like, well,
What would be your advice to other people then? With your experiences as young as you are, what would your advice be to other people that may be experiencing some of these issues that you've experienced as well?
I can't stress enough how hopeless people feel. So it's like I'm trying to send a message to the people who feel really, really fucking hopeless, and they feel like there's no way out, because there is. And I didn't feel like there was a way out. I didn't feel like I was ever going to get out of it. I thought, I've got no chance. It's taking me. And it very nearly did. Luckily, I did get help at the right time, and anyone can get help. We're in a society where there's communities like this, like Change, Grow, Live, where you can seek help and you can get better. And I just would urge anyone who's got a problem with addiction to try and get that help, because the positive impact it has on your life is just amazing. Brilliant. Honestly.
Harriette, before we finish, I've got 10 questions that I'd like to ask you. Quick fire questions. Completely. Quick fire. Well, I say quick fire. Okay, I ask these questions and people are often a little bit like, I don't know exactly. No, I'm not expecting no one to get the pistons out sort of thing. But first question, what's your favourite word?
Word? I like juxtaposition.
That is a really good word. Yeah, juxtaposition. I like that. Yeah, I like that one. Least favourite word?
Least favourite word? Maybe like the terminologies like smackheads and things like that. If I could eradicate them.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Tell me something that excites you.
Nature.
Something that doesn't excite you.
The thought of people destroying nature.
What sound or noise do you love?
Music.
Sound or noise do you hate?
Shouting.
What's your favourite swear word?
Fuck.
Nice. What profession would you like to attempt?
Conservation and counselling.
What profession would you not like to do?
Not like to do sewage work, sorry.
Understandable. And lastly, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You made it!
Yeah, come on in!
I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting to be here, lad.
I wasn't expecting to be here. I was expecting to be the complete opposite.
Bloody hell, recovery got me to heaven.
Harriette, thank you so much for coming on. You've been wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Cheers,
Thanks for having me.
And if you've enjoyed this episode of the Believe in People podcast, please check out the other episodes and hit that subscribe button. We're on Apple Music and Spotify, so please like and subscribe to be notified about our new episodes. You can also search for the Believe in People podcast on your favourite listening device, and if you can leave us a review, that will really help us in getting our message out there and rising up the daily podcast charts.